Once upon a time, in a faraway kingdom surrounded by lush forests and rolling hills, there lived a king and queen who were deeply loved by their people. Yet their hearts were heavy, for though they had wealth, power, and all the joys of a grand castle, they had no child. Every day the queen prayed for a blessing, and every night she dreamed of the laughter of a child echoing through the halls. One bright morning, as the queen bathed in a quiet forest stream, a curious frog leapt onto the mossy bank. Its golden eyes gleamed as it croaked, "Your wish shall be granted. Before the year is out you will have a daughter." Startled, the queen laughed, though her heart leapt with hope. The frog's prophecy came true. The queen gave birth to a daughter so beautiful and radiant that the king declared, "She shall be called Briar Rose, for her beauty will bloom like a rose among thorns." To celebrate, he planned a feast so magnificent that its splendor would be remembered for generations. The king invited not only his court and nobility but also the wise women of the land, those blessed with magical gifts to bestow upon the child. However, there were 13 wise women in the kingdom, and the king possessed only 12 golden plates fine enough for such honored guests. Reluctantly, he decided not to invite the 13th. The feast was a spectacle of grandeur. Music filled the air, and tables groaned under the weight of roasted meats, golden pastries, and jeweled fruits. One by one, the wise women approached the cradle where Briar Rose lay, her tiny fingers curling in her sleep. The first wise woman touched her brow and said, "She shall grow to be the most beautiful maiden in the world." The second blessed her with the gift of wisdom. The third gave her grace, the fourth kindness, and the fifth the golden voice that would make her songs like the sweetest bird song. Each blessing made the air shimmer with magic, and the court marveled at the child's bright future. But as the 11th wise woman finished her blessing, the great oak doors of the hall slammed open with a crash. A cold wind swept in, extinguishing the torches. There in the doorway stood the 13th wise woman. Her face was shadowed with anger, and her eyes glittered with a cold, fiery light. The court fell silent. She strode forward, her black robes swirling around her like a storm cloud. "So I am not worthy of an invitation," she said, her voice echoing through the hall. Before anyone could respond, she reached the cradle and raised her hand. "Because you have scorned me, I shall leave my mark. When the princess turns 15, she shall prick her finger on a spindle and die." Gasps of horror filled the room. The queen wept, clutching her child to her chest. The king stood frozen, powerless to act. But then the 12th wise woman stepped forward. "Do not despair," she said, her voice steady. "I cannot undo the curse, but I can soften it. The princess will not die. Instead, she shall fall into a deep sleep lasting 100 years. At the end of that time she will awaken, restored and unharmed." Though comforted by the softened curse, the king was determined to prevent it from ever coming true. He ordered every spinning wheel and spindle in the kingdom to be destroyed. The search was relentless. Spindles were burned in great bonfires, spinning wheels smashed to splinters, and spinning forbidden under threat of imprisonment. Years passed, and Briar Rose grew into a maiden of extraordinary beauty, grace, and charm. Her hair gleamed like spun gold, and her laughter brought joy to all who heard it. She was beloved by all, and her kindness touched even the lowliest servant. Yet the curse hung over her like a shadow, unspoken but never forgotten. On her 15th birthday, as the castle bustled with preparations for her celebration, Briar Rose wandered the halls. She had always been curious, and on this day she found herself climbing a winding staircase to a tower she had never explored. At the top she discovered a small ancient door. The door creaked open, revealing a dusty chamber. In the center of the room sat an old woman, hunched over a spindle, spinning flax into fine thread. "Good day, grandmother," Briar Rose said. "What are you doing?" "I am spinning, my child," the old woman replied, her voice kind yet strange. "What is that marvelous thing that twirls so prettily?" "It is a spindle. Would you like to try?" Eager to learn, Briar Rose reached out. No sooner had her finger touched the spindle than the curse took hold. She pricked her finger and fell to the floor, her eyes closing as if in peaceful sleep. The old woman vanished, for she was none other than the 13th wise woman in disguise. The curse swept through the castle like a whisper of wind. The king and queen fell asleep in their thrones, the courtiers slumped where they stood, and even the animals in the stables stilled. The cooks in the kitchen froze mid-motion, the scullery maids dozed at their basins, and the castle fell silent. Around the castle a great hedge of thorns began to grow. The thorns were fierce and twisted, and they climbed higher and thicker with each passing year until the castle was hidden entirely. Decades passed and the story of the sleeping princess became legend. Many brave princes came to try their luck, seeking to break through the hedge and awaken Briar Rose. But the thorns were merciless, their barbs tearing through flesh and armor alike. None who attempted the journey survived. At last 100 years passed. A young prince, drawn by the tale of the sleeping maiden, arrived in the kingdom. When he approached the hedge, the thorns seemed to shiver and part before him, blooming into fragrant roses. The path was clear. The prince entered the castle, his footsteps echoing in the stillness. Dust covered the grand halls and cobwebs draped the chandeliers like ghostly veils. Yet everything remained as it had been, time frozen in an eternal moment. At last he climbed the spiral staircase to the tower and found Briar Rose lying on a bed of silk, her beauty undiminished by the years. He was overcome with love and knelt beside her. Gently he leaned down and kissed her. At that moment her eyes fluttered open and she smiled at him. The spell was broken. All around them the castle stirred to life. The king and queen awoke, the courtiers stretched and yawned, and the birds outside began to sing once more. Briar Rose and the prince were soon wed in a celebration as grand as the one that marked her birth. Their love brought joy and renewal to the kingdom, and they lived happily ever after, their tale retold for generations as Little Briar Rose.